Hello and welcome to Race Streamer. Today I'm out and about on some roads about 20 minutes from where I live roughly, some of the quieter roads anyway, and I'm here to talk about track driving techniques and how they can be practiced on the road. Now the first thing to say, and hopefully it's quite obvious, but you just need to be sensible if you're going to go and practice these techniques on the road. Like, there's other road users about, you have to consider them. This is why I'm in a quieter area today to practice these things. And just be safe while you're driving. Don't go overboard with practicing these techniques. Just stay well within your limits, stick to the speed limits, all that usual stuff. Just be sensible. So, first thing I'm going to talk about is actually just practicing on the pedals before you even set off anywhere. So, I've got the car turned off at the moment, and what you can start to practice while you've got the car turned off is actually heel and toe technique. And that's, for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure a lot of you do, is where you press on the brake pedal and you change down a gear normally, and you just blip the throttle to rev match. Now, for those of you who don't know what rev matching is, that's where you raise the revs of the engine to have a smoother down change of gear, so that way you don't have to ride the clutch for quite as long while you're changing down to a lower gear. So heel and toeing, I just liked practicing that to start with before I tried it on the road. So I would get used to putting a moderate amount of pressure on the brake pedal, dipping the clutch and straddling my right foot over to the throttle to press it down a little bit. And as I was doing that, I would then release both my right and left foot at the same time. And then the theory is that will produce a smoother down change at the same time as braking. So you just might want to practice that a few times to begin with before you set off anywhere, just to get a quick movement going on, which I feel pretty happy with in this car anyway. It takes a bit of adapting when I move into different cars. Oh, and the other things to say is I can only practice it in this car. My other car, which I'll put a picture of just here, that is definitely not doable to practice heel and toe technique because the brake and the throttle pedal are so much wider apart than in this car, as you can see here. So we'll get going, and I think what we'll do to start with is we'll just do a bit of rev matching when I'm changing down some gears without braking. We'll see how this goes, because I can't say I'm always completely consistent at it, which is why I'm still practicing at the end of the day. So like I said, I'm on a fairly quiet bit of road. I can only see one car up ahead of me, a few hundred meters ahead at the moment, nothing behind me. So just going 30 miles an hour at the moment, even though it's 50. And it's just a good opportunity to practice rev matching as you change down. So it's just a little blip of the throttle as you're bringing the clutch up and change down a gear at the same time. And this is kind of the first thing you want to practice really before you get onto heel and toe technique, because if you can just get used to how much throttle you need to give it before you change down a gear, so that way you don't give the throttle too much input and over rev the engine and then the car sort of lurches forwards. It's good to get the hang of that first before you then try some heel and toeing. Now I've got a car behind me now, so I'm definitely not going to heel and toe up to this roundabout. And reason for that is, at least for me in this car, I cannot do a successful heel and toe downshift unless I'm braking moderately hard, and obviously I'm not going to do that because there's a car behind me at the moment. So all I'm going to do is just let off the throttle nice and early so I don't actually use the brakes on the run up to this roundabout, and I'm going to use engine braking to slow me down. And each time I change down a gear, I'm just going to rev match, try and get as smooth a downshift as possible. And I think I've got a habit of over revving slightly as I bring the clutch up, but be interested to know what you guys feel like when you run through this sort of thing on the road. So we'll see if we can lose this guy behind me. Hopefully no one else decides to join me coming off the roundabout. Okay, I think we're good. All right. So, I've got a few cars coming towards me in the opposite direction, but nothing behind me. So, it's a pretty good opportunity to practice some heel and toe. And there's now a lorry about, I don't know, 300-400 meters behind me. So, I'm going to get the car in a straight line on this little stretch of road here. I'm going to brake pretty heavily. I'm going to go from, let's say, third gear at 4,000 revs down to second gear when I get to 30 miles an hour. So brake and then, ooh, that was a bit of an over rev. Okay, but that's the point basically. You get to a bit of road where it's clear and then we'll try again. Yeah, that was a bit better. So I'm slowing down pretty quickly to be able to achieve that. Feels weird doing it on the road, but I feel better practicing it, to be honest, on the road rather than turning up on a track when I'm going to be going a heck of a lot quicker. Because if you're heel and towing into a fast corner on a circuit, for example Paddock Hill, I can get around Paddock Hill in this car on road tyres at about 75 miles an hour, maybe a bit higher. So I don't really want to be practicing heel and towing at that speed. I'd rather do it on the roads where I can practice going from say 50 down to 30. So that's the kind of heel and towing side of things anyway. Oh, and I need to turn around as well, because I can't go that way because there's a town there. There's a roundabout that way actually. We're all right. Forgot about that. Yeah, I should have I should have checked out these roads before I started making the video. I have been down here before, just not down to this roundabout. Anyway, so we've covered the stuff that you can do with the throttle pedal to help make your driving input smoother. Now the next thing to sort of talk about is more about the brake pedal, and a lot of people talk about trail braking around the circuit. Now that's where you brake hard in a straight line and then you keep braking a little as you're going around the corner, like I am at the moment. I was just applying a little bit of brake pressure while going around this roundabout. We're going to have a Mini behind us, so we're going to go around the roundabout again, see if we can lose him. Yep, cool. So essentially that would just be if I just apply a bit of brake pressure and it helps put the weight over the front of the car and it helps the car turn in a bit sharper. So that's a track driving technique that's actually quite easily practiced on the road. You probably do it anyways, it's just you don't think about how much brake pressure you're applying. So there was a brilliant video on Scott Mansell's channel, which is Driver61, where he does a few classroom sessions and he does a really detailed video on trail braking, which I highly recommend. If any of you are watching this and you want to learn more about trail braking, go and watch that video because he can explain it so much better than I can. But he talks about, I think it's something like 30% brake pressure as you're turning into a corner, and then you gradually come off that brake pressure when you get to the apex of the corner, and then gradually get on the throttle as you head towards the exit. It's definitely worth checking out that video to see what his proper explanation of it is though. So I'm going to try a little bit of trail braking around this roundabout, going about 30 miles an hour. It just helps bring the front in a little bit. You can feel the weight transfer. You don't have to press that hard on the brake pedal, but it's just to really understand the effects that your inputs have on the attitude of the car. So that's whether the weight's on the front or the back of the car. And then the other thing that you can do with the brake pedal, for those of you that are more confident, is left foot braking. Now I probably should have done this at the start of the video, but it's good to just get a feel for left foot braking without the car being turned on. So just get used to pressing down on the brake pedal, maybe moving your foot between the clutch to the brake pedal while you're stationary, and just make sure that you're accustomed to that first, because there's a lot of people saying videos that talk about left foot braking is that when you're completely new to it, a lot of people will put the same amount of pressure on the brake pedal with their left foot as they would on the clutch, which basically means you you stop pretty violently and you don't stop smoothly either. So for me, if I'm going to practice it, I don't left foot brake that often on the road because it's just really impractical, and if you need to down change your gear without planning it, then you are actually stuffed. So it's actually, I would say, probably the worst one of these to try and practice on the road. I've done most of my refining of the technique on the track. I'm still working on it, obviously, because I'm not a pro driver or anything, but this is just for those of you who want a bit of direction on practicing it from the point of view of a novice who doesn't even go racing. So I'm just going about to go in a straight line again, just doing the same route between two roundabouts at the moment. And if you just want to get a feel for the brake, then while you're in a straight line, just apply the tiniest bit of brake pressure. Just dab your left foot down a little bit to feel where the brake starts to bite and where you start to slow down. And just be really gradual with your inputs, and that's how you can get used to the amount of brake pressure that you kind of want to go for with your left foot. So I'll do it again. I'll just move my right foot out of the way so you can see. I'm just going to go a bit quicker this time towards where I think it will bite. We're starting to slow down a relatively quick amount. So that's, my left foot's still less sensitive than my right foot, I'll give you a clue, which is why I'm still working on this technique. But yeah, you really have to be delicate with your left foot, otherwise you will you will basically do an emergency stop and you will stall the car simultaneously because you won't have control over the clutch and your gears. Now, if you're one of those lucky people who's got an automatic transmission, or you've got flappy paddles, blah blah blah, obviously you can use your left foot on the brake the whole time, and that's ideal for you. But for those of you who've got a manual H-passing gearbox like I have, then your left foot can do both jobs while you're on track. And the only reason, for the record, the only reason to left foot brake on a circuit, especially if you're in a H-passing gearbox, the only reason to left foot brake is if you haven't got to change gear. Obviously, otherwise you're stuffed. Like, you can't be crossing over your feet on the pedals. That would just be absolute suicide. So now I've changed down gears before the roundabout. Going to go a little bit quicker around this one. Left foot brake a bit to get the nose of the car in. I'll balance the throttle around the roundabout. This guy's let me go, so that's nice of him. And there we go. That felt pretty smooth, if I can say so. It's easy for me to say when you're just watching. You can't feel anything, but hey ho. I'm always analysing while I'm on the go though, and that's the thing when you practice this stuff on the roads and you're going at slower speeds, you have got the time to analyse as you go. So I think there was one more technique I needed to talk. Oh yeah, that was it. So double clutching. Now this isn't a technique that really applies to track driving necessarily. I'm not sure if it's something that is more frequent in historic cars or older cars, because I know I've got the dad of one of my friends who has a few cars. He's a big car guy, and his dad has an old Triumph of some sort. I'm not very good at my old cars in terms of knowing what they are, but I was talking to him about double clutching a while ago because the clutch on my other car is getting really worn out, and he was saying that he frequently double clutches in his older car because that's just required. So double clutching is, put simply, where you bring the clutch, so you press the clutch down, you release it into neutral, and then you push the clutch down again and engage the new gear. Now if you do it as slowly as that, your revs will drop to idle, so that's below 1000 revs, and then when you go to engage the new gear, then you'll actually sort of lurch forwards, it will slow down, and it's redundant because the idea of double clutching is that you have smoother gear changes, especially when you're entering into the new gear. I'm not mechanically minded, so I can't explain how it benefits the workings inside the gearbox or whatnot, but just go and look up a video on it. It makes sense to do it, I'll give you that. So double clutch downshifts with a rev match, and it's a lot smoother when I'm putting it into the new gear as I'm changing down. And the only reason I've started doing this recently, like I said, is because my other car, the clutch is massively worn, and it's really hard to get it into first and second gear sometimes. Yeah, simple as. So the final thing that I want to do to wrap up this video is, oh yeah, I forgot the first thing I was going to talk about, right. Hands at 9 and 3. So if you haven't heard of this before, I would suppose that you've probably never done a track driving thing, but as far as I know, every instructor I've ever had has told me to keep my hands at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the steering wheel. Now when you're road driving, it's quite easy to keep your hands in this position, including when you're going round a roundabout. It's only if you need to rotate the wheel, I would say more than half its way round, then you'll need to obviously rearrange your hands as you're going. But this is such a fundamental thing to practice. Like, see, I'm even mucking about now, I'm putting my hand down here. It's bad habits. But it's always a good habit to keep your hands at 9 and 3. When you're track driving, it just means that you've got immediate control over the steering wheel. And enough said really. So when I come up to this roundabout, then I'm going to try and keep my hands at 9 and 3. Just give it a bit of a break. Coming into the roundabout just over 30. Yeah, it's not difficult. You just got to keep your hands where you think 9 and 3 o'clock are. And it just gives you more control at the end of the day. It's a good habit to get into for track driving. Not always the best for road, but there's nothing wrong with it most of the time. And yeah, the final thing I was going to do to wrap up the video is talk about smooth driving inputs. So every single time that I'm driving on the road, I'm trying to drive as smoothly as possible, and it's just a good exercise in blending your inputs. So essentially, when people talk about track driving, they talk about if you're trail braking into a corner, you gradually get off the brake pedal in conjunction with turning into the corner, and when you reach the apex, then you start to gradually increase your pressure on the throttle as you unwind the steering and straighten up. So all of these smooth inputs, it's difficult to do it exactly like you would want to on a track when you're driving on the roads, but the same point applies of like, if you need to say, you realise you need to turn more on a roundabout and start to run a bit wide, you don't suddenly turn a lot more, because it upsets the balance of the car and it causes understeer, it causes excess wear on everything. It's just a much less efficient way of driving. So just if you can be smoother with your inputs in every way, it's going to mean that you're more controlled when you're driving on the limit on track. And for me, that's the thing that I'm trying to work on at the moment. It's what I'm thinking about when it comes to my first race that's in 2 days, first race in karts that is. And it's what I'm thinking about for when I do the sprint series in this car. First rounds at Cadwell Park in April, because I haven't put the video up yet, but I'll be putting it up soon in a video where I talk about analysing your in-car footage. And it's because I did a sprint series round, this is the Japanese sprint series, and I did a round of that at the end of last year in my Toyota, this car, and I had a bit of a moment coming out of, I don't know what the corner name is, but it was about a 70-mile-an-hour corner at Sneston, so it's not the highest speed, but it's pretty slow, sorry, it's pretty fast, and I just went into the corner too quickly, and I came off the brakes too harshly, and it transferred a lot of the weight back to the rear of the car, and it upset the balance of my car, and then I had a massive oversteer moment as a result. At the end of the day, I still think I was going too fast into the corner, but we'll leave that detail for analysing in that video. But point being, just the smoother you are on track, then the more manageable the car's attitude is, and then you'll be able to manage any oversteer moments or anything that is outside of your plan, basically, a lot better. So that's it for this video. I've probably talked too much on the subject. If you've stuck around for this long, fair enough. All right, have a good day all, and I will speak to you in another video soon.